Hey everyone, and welcome. This is the first time that I really get the chance ever, and that's also down to you all following this channel becoming more relevant, to be able to test a game patch prior to the new release, and I'm happy to present you all the information and the new stuff that is in this particular patch of ACC. It's not just a new patch going from 159 to 160, but there's also going to be 2 new cars and 1 new track. And I just want to give you a quick overview. There's more videos coming. I'll have a track guide publicly and then have the in-depth track guide for the members as well. Let's start with the Mercedes, maybe. And it was a really good car before. It was aerodynamically sophisticated. The anti-dive system really was a strength of the car, and of course, Mercedes hasn't changed much to that. It's still very good. It's still really planted. It eats curbs like crazy, especially on Imola, so it will be very strong there for sure. Most of the changes that the real car really sees are into the direction of reliability. Some setup changes have become easier on the real car, using less screws, for example, or just being able to do it faster, which in the sim doesn't really matter for us. For example, there's a new drinking system on the car. Unless you rebuild that at home, it's not going to matter too much to us. On the other hand, the tire has changed. I'll talk you through in a minute, and that also required a slight rework of the traction control and ABS system. But this is more down to the tire, and I'll talk about that in a bit. In theory, the car has one nice feature, but I think also several cars in the real world have that by now, which is a drop start function. So you press the button, the car drops down, and as soon as the car hits the ground, the engine starts, just to save a little time there. But as far as I can tell, it's not implemented in ACC just yet. The other car that we're seeing is the new version of the Ferrari, while the Mercedes, by the way, is called the 2020 version. It's not called Evo. The Ferrari is called Evo. And while the Ferrari got even more aerodynamically sophisticated and more efficient, overall, it's still a similar car than before. But it has a few changes that the Mercedes doesn't have, so it does take it a bit further in the updated version. Most notably, probably the longer wheelbase will be something that you will notice in terms of how the car responds, turns in, does the corner in general, throttle inputs, braking inputs, pitch sensitivity, all that will kind of be slightly changed. But I think the more pronounced thing that I noticed on the car is, not that I just noticed it, but of course also talk to Aris about it, and he'll probably tell you as well during his 8-hour-long streams that the engine response of the car is the main change that you will notice really quickly. And if you're too harsh in the throttle now with the car, the rear will be very, very loose initially, just because the power is almost as sudden as in an electric engine. And so the engine maps have been reworked, and you can drive something like engine map 3, for example, on the Ferrari now, just to tame the engine output a little down. Overall though, the cars, again, just slight updates to the existing ones. Both cars more or less have things that have more impact in the real world concerning reliability and other small changes. But to the game, the bigger changes will be from the tire model in a minute. The other thing, the track kind of speaks for itself. The great thing is that since I was there a couple of weeks ago with Lamborghini, gave me a chance to really experience what this track is about. And a lot of what makes this track special is the elevation changes and the, say, rather unusual track layout, because it doesn't really feel like it has this modern design or anything. It just has its own natural flow, so to say. And let's say the pairing of the type of curbs that we're having, the elevation changes, and the angles, the radius changes in all these corners kind of make this track now a very, very much a driver's track. And this is already almost everything to say about this track without really driving it. The other part you want to probably need to figure out is finding the track limits here, because it's really important. If you want to do fast lap times on Imola, you will probably need to really exploit every centimeter of the track here, and it's pretty difficult to find. And in some corners with just wide curbs in general, plus the sausage curbs behind it, really make it difficult to nail laps there. And I'm pretty sure since the track is rather difficult, we'll see a wider spread in lap times from the very fast to the slower drivers. Let's talk about the tire though now. First thing is we get the new DHE tire, which is just the tire version that was run in the 2020 Real Series, which has a few simple to understand features. One being the drop off in lap time from the first 1 or 2 quarter laps to later in the stint has become way less pronounced. So you won't see much tire change. You can easily do 5 to 10 laps without noticing much change in the tire's grip potential. So if you're testing, you'll have more lap time, more laps in a row now, so to say, where you can test something without becoming a victim of the tire actually becoming worse. That's the first thing. On the more technical side, the tire spreads the heat a little nicer now, and also the tire does have slightly stiffer sidewalls now, which will give it some better performance under high aerodynamic load. But I guess that part is not as perceptible in the game. I guess the bigger changes actually come from the 1.6.0 update to the tire physics. So let's talk about that. And Aris will probably explain to you in depth even more, so I'm trying to keep it short in a way. But what was changed to the tire model is the way that realignment forces affect the overall available tire grip. And that is probably some people might be able to immediately deploy this new technique or the new driving style that can be used in the game, just because the limit in a way of the tire has become, when it was very small before, it is now a little bit wider, and also the grip loss and regain is a little smoother in the steering, so you will certainly get a better feel for how wide the limit really is on the car, and to some degree it will make it easier to stay somewhat near the limit. On the other hand, the drop off after you go too far is going to be a little more severe. So positives and, well, not negatives really, but just a different way of how the cars will feel. As I said, it's not really that pronounced. It's more in the subtle amount of changes. Additionally, have to consider that there will also be some aerodynamic changes, and they pretty much come into play with the new behavior of the tire model as well. What you will notice is, and that's kind of in conjunction then, on the straights the force feedback will be a tiny bit less, which is why I increased my force feedback strength by a couple clicks, make it 5% or something maybe. The other thing you'll notice is the force feedback gets a lot stronger when the front tires are loaded up really, really high. And you'll notice that on Imola, coming down the hill into the double right a lot. When there's a lot of aerodynamic load, you're into the brakes, and the outside front tire just carries so much load that you'll get pretty much a new feeling in the steering wheel, which gives you a lot of resistance. And in both directions, kind of. If you tend to open up, the car won't turn at all anymore. If you turn a tiny bit more, the car will oversteer or understeer. And I think now, with these forces in the steering wheel available, you kind of get a better feeling of what you can tap into on the front now, especially in these situations. Let's talk about these aero changes as well a tiny bit. They're of course very technical, but I'll make it very easy to understand, I guess. What was changed in the end is the tolerance of the aerodynamics to yaw angles, which just means the car, if you just picture it for a minute, the car is on its radius throughout a corner, and since the direction of the car is constantly changing, the actual way of direction of travel is a slightly bit different than where the car is going to head in the next millisecond, or well, indefinitely, incredibly small amounts of time. However, what you're looking out for is the car is now at slow speeds because the tire allows you a little more. And at slow speeds, the aerodynamics don't play much of a role. There is a tiny bit more tolerance to slight amounts of understeer and oversteer before the aerodynamic really goes away from you. But the more the speed increases and the faster you go, the more you upset the car at high speeds, the more penalizing this will become. So while we have a more predictable, more mechanically dependent, and more tolerant car at slower speeds now, we will have it ever more intolerant towards higher speeds. So let's say from something up to 180, 200 or so, we'll call this medium speeds, you would say now the car is a bit more twitchy, and above 220 it will become very, very intolerant to any sort of driving over the limit, because the aerodynamic flow under and over the car is simply going to stall, which, well, with downforce dependent car just means you're going to spin or go straight into some wall. This should, I think, be it with the overview of the most important changes. And I guess now we just take it to the track a bit.